Hello everyone, good afternoon. On behalf of Exhibitions, I would like to welcome you all to second webinar of India Warehousing Show Digital Week. Thank you for taking out time and being here today. I would also like to thank all my speakers for taking out time to share insights. I would like to introduce the very interesting topic for this webinar. No paper, no problems. Why forward-thinking companies are adopting a paperless supply chain. I'm pleased to introduce the moderator of our session, Saurabh Goel, Managing Director, JUSDA India. JUSDA is a supply chain platform company of the Foxconn Technology Group, a Fortune 30 organization. Prior to this, Saurabh founded ThinkLink Supply Chain Services, where he worked with world-leading companies in helping them optimize their supply chains, especially with regards to warehousing, material flow, and automation. He has a keen interest in using technology and automation to drive supply chain value creation. Recorded version of webinar will be available on the platform. Now, without a further talk here, I return the time over to our moderator, Mr. Goel. Saurabh, over to you.
Thank you, Rima. Thank you for inviting me to this session. It's an excellent topic, very topical, over the last 12, 18 months, given COVID, work from home, so many things, right? Digitization has been picking up, and so therefore delighted to be here, and thanks to you and the IWS team for putting together this session. To begin with, I would just like to start by introducing my fellow panel members. We have an excellent panel of speakers to discuss today. Kartik Shah, he's the head SCM and customer service for Sennheiser Electronics in India. He's also a governing body member of the CVSCL. We have Mr. Nanda Kishore. He's the director of supply chain and logistics at Safron, a leading French company in the aerospace domain. Then we have Mr. Hemant Sood. He's a director value and supply chain for Raymonds. We have Joshua Ebenezer. He's the principal consultant at NuCov Facili-Trade. Joshua comes with years of experience in the international trade compliance, customs compliance, indirect taxation space, both in the logistics services side and then working with leading litigation and law firms, and now independently practicing. Then we have Mr. Swapnil Shah. He's the founder and CEO of Freight Tiger. Freight Tiger is doing a yeoman job in bringing digitization to the domestic freight market. And Swapnil will obviously be able to bring in his perspective on how digitization is being driven in the domestic transport space. We have Mr. Anil Nair, who is from Roots Innovation Lab, and they are building products around robotic process automation, etc., which are being deployed in the supply chain space to drive automation. So we've got a good mix of people from the end user industry who can talk about what their perspective on running supply chains is, and where they see the need for digitization and what they are doing and what challenges there are. And we have some leading voices from the solutions side, people who are working with customers and are bringing varied perspectives across the supply chain in terms of how and where digitization is successful. So hopefully with this group, we can have a very interesting topic out there, right? Before we start, just to set context, I will ask IWS team Rima to run our first poll question of the panel, and we have live audience, and hopefully we can get their answers to the poll question instantaneously, which can tell us what the audience is thinking, and therefore it can set some context for our discussions. Rima. Yeah, while they do that, right? When I was thinking about this panel discussion, right, and digitization and no paper. So obviously, right, the key questions which come to mind is what are the drivers of digitization? Why is digitization potentially happening now? Is it just because people want more automation, they want more speed, they want more flexibility? Is it a sustainability agenda which is driving reduction of paper, right? Is it a cost advantage? Does it actually lead to a cost reduction? Is there a value construct out there, or is there a business model enablement or a business competitiveness which is driven as you automate and you take paper out, right? So and those are the sort of areas which we will sort of look to sort of understand as we go through this discussion. So here's the first poll question which we have. Which area of supply chain is most paper-based? And the choices are warehousing, transport, international freight, and customs trade compliance. So let's just wait to hear from the audience on what they think are areas where paper is more and more automation is needed. All right, so here are the results. 50% of people think that warehousing is paper-based and more digitization is needed. Transport for sure is paper-based. So Swapnil must be enjoying this answer. International trade as well, and customs and trade compliance. So across the board, right? And I think this is the truth, right? Supply chain execution across the board remains a paper-based, right? And whichever area of supply chain you sort of really go and look at, there's a lot of paper out there. To start the panel discussion now, I would like to go to Hemant Sood, right? And Hemant, why don't you give us your perspective on, why digitization is something that, let's say, you're looking at, and what are key challenges that you see? How can we accelerate digitization? And where do you see this sort of going?
Thanks, Goel. I hope you can hear and everybody can hear. So is a very pertinent question, Saurabh. You asked why digitization, and now the question is why now?
Yeah.
Why there's a need of acceleration? I think the world right now is going through pandemic, and we've been living through pandemic for the last 18 months, probably a little more. Since it started in November 2019, in fact, of March 2020, where India started witnessing the pandemic. So it's been almost 18, 19 months that the world is seeing pandemic in some form, kind, shape, and also in terms of different waves, wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. So if we dial back probably 1.5 years back, when we started dealing with pandemic, so any of the world, does they really know how to deal with pandemic? How many companies actually has spent their resources working towards pandemic or gearing up their supply chain to deal with pandemic? Probably 99.99% of the companies might not have thought about it. It's only 0.01% of the company are thinking about maybe put in some BCPs on the back end to see whether this will actually materializes. In fact, I remember in one of my older companies in SC Johnson in India, where we worked on the pandemic, which was like a paper project which we have dealt it but never executed it, not even a single day. So this is a kind of readiness. Now I think that is a trigger point for any company to go paperless. Now why now? So why now is, I think the ecosystem is changing. The ecosystem in which the whole world is be it consumer, be it customer, be it retailer or organization. So the ecosystem is changing very rapidly, and the demand in the ecosystem and the acceleration in the ecosystem is triggered by pandemic. So I remember 2 years back, or maybe March 2020, when we started dealing with pandemic, there was no papers because we are not carrying any papers. It's all the laptop. Everything was electronically. Within 3 months, you adapted to paperless. Everything which there was like adapted to paperless system, and then people accepted that, even though it was by force, but people accepted that. Now that's the acceleration that has happened. I think that's the momentum we are ready to carry. Now, what do you look at from today? Where do you go from today? So when I say where we go from today, so look at 10 years from now. What are the changes in the labor? So labor is going to be well-trained. Labor is going to be like more educated and more tech savvy. The generations of millennials and then the 2000s which are coming into workforce are very tech savvy, because from the day one they are exposed to computers, unlike the generations of 80s and 90s when they are exposed to computers only at the age of 18, 20 or maybe 15. So right now the child is kind of born exposed to electronic and paperless activity. So at home, at office, everything is shifting towards paperless. So that's the big paradigm shift is changing in the labor trends of it. And the future generation will definitely do away from the papers, and they don't like to have papers. So everything is on handheld devices or on the cloud. So that big paradigm shift is happening in the outlook of the people and the labor that is coming into the workforce. Another thing which is happening in terms of the machines are becoming intelligent. So when I say machines are coming intelligent, we have seen like mobiles phone, which is like Nokia handheld black devices, which has only numeric, not numeric 160 alphabets of message, and then you have to go to next message. Today, like advent of all digitalization, the choices are limitless. So machines are becoming intelligent, is evolving every day. So the length of and the age of the technology is only 12 weeks. In 12 weeks, the technology becomes obsolete. And now, can you upgrade papers every 12 weeks? An answer is possibly impossible. So you can't upgrade papers every day. Can you upgrade your machine or your paper on digitally? Answer is yes. So that's a paradigm shift which is happening, is going to happen and rapidly happening these days. And the third one is, now it is not that how machines are becoming intelligent, everything is getting connected. Be it now coming particular to the supply chain domain, everything is connected. When I say everything is connected, be it like in terms of warehousing, be it the tags, be it the labels, so everything is connected to each other. Even the transportation and logistics is connected. So the interconnectivity is going up and is going up rapidly. There is end-to-end tracking, end-to-end understanding. So visibility is going up by putting a lot of uh, like data nodes in terms of RFIDs, in terms of nature uploaded, and people are considering it, which is like acceptable norm and accepted practice. So that change is also triggering for the future to unfold sooner than later. Probably the last one which I look at, since I am representing the consumer side, I'm very close to the consumer. Even the consumer is demanding that you need to go paperless. When I say you need to go paperless, I'll tell you the live example. One example in one of the Scandinavian countries like Norway and those countries, they are doing away with the papers. Like most of the toothpaste was coming with the mono cartons, and these companies are doing away from mono cartons. Now, in doing that, they are achieving multiple agendas. One is sustainability, and also they are reducing their carbon footprint for the organization. Now, this is one of the outward driven towards the consumer phase of the organization, which they are trying to drive sustainability. Now, coming to inward processing system, where like I'm thinking when you can definitely attract consumer without putting a mono carton on the labor, I think within the consumer, within the customer, within the supply chain, most people understand that the paperless is a way to go for future. So that again, people are demanding, hence consumer and customer are demanding to go paperless. Now, this is the ecosystem which currently is going through. Now, this is also facilitated by Government of India and most of the organization, where they are pushing digital valleys and digital utilization. So it's like all the world is changing and all the world is pushing utilization of less and less in paper. So that's what I see in future also. Even consumer-centric countries will be going more or less using less of paper in documentation, in also in the product also, which will be a sustainable, and obviously there is some responsibility all the organization owe to the future generation also. So now
Yes,
that
thank you. Thanks, Hemant. I think you set it up, beautifully, right? Talking about how obviously, right, the pandemic drove a massive change, which probably would have taken ages otherwise to come, right? Also labor, right? Labor's readiness to use technology, right? Because obviously technology adoption from a labor readiness perspective. Typically, we talk about technology adoption in the labor cost context, but sometimes, I think it's a very different perspective that, today the labor force is ready to adopt technology. Forget about cost or not cost, right? Labor is more ready to adopt technology, right? Third, you spoke about the environment from a tech perspective, right? Mobility, everyone having a phone, more computing power inside a small device, and everything else which is going on, right? Again, right, another point that you made about how the external environment is changing, business environment is changing rapidly, and a tech-based system is so much easier to adopt and change faster, right? And then you spoke about how, the overall environment for sustainability, right? Markets, investors, consumers, everyone wanting sustainability, and therefore sustainability is important, right? So thanks a lot. I think you set up the whole discussion so well. Kartik, coming to you and taking on from Hemant, right? How do you see this going, and which areas of supply chain management, right? Let's say warehousing, transport, international trade, customs, you see this gaining adoption more, and why? And also, from a process perspective, right? Do you see this more important in the perspective of execution, in payments, in coordination? Where do you see it, right? Both from an area of supply chain perspective and process perspective, getting driven forward. Kartik.
Yeah, so Saurabh, as Hemant rightly said, though he said that due to pandemic, a lot of automations has happened, which was the need of the hour, but I would go a step behind. We started that in Sennheiser in 2018, wherein we go away with the hard copies of the POD. And later on in 2019, we then automated and e-stored the custom documentation, which here showing in the survey that 50% of the manual task is in custom and trade compliance. So how we manage that is we first align with our auditors, Deloitte, and then we looked at the law so that we are not bypassing any compliances. And we kept the record one onto the mail, which obviously there. Second, we then had an server, internal server, so that we would not have any cyber issue. We kept the record there so that as and when any requirement comes either from the agencies like custom or DRI, we can extract that immediately on a speed of a quit. And at the time of audit, the auditors can simply look at the soft copy rather than printing it, and they can just evaluate. And taking it forward, we are now planning to go away with invoices. So invoicing from government is also in place. The government is supporting with like paperless, custom filing, faceless assessment, same way invoicing in GST. So we are working on that. And we are seeing that how the possibilities, how our transport partner or our distribution partners are equipped with, so that in transit, if any query comes, whether they are in position to showcase that documents to the authority. So that is third in a row. And when we go away with the corporate world, we can see that the way we got educated, we need to have one homework book and one classwork book. Look at the kids now with this pandemic in place, they are just having books on their iPads or on their laptops, and they are just completing their tasks, their examination, everything online. So that is one thing. And then look at the way we go out for shopping. Earlier, we used to take hard copy of the bills. Now doing the shopping online, most of the times we never ask, even if we go to the store, we say that please don't print it. We have that SMS which you have sent for the shopping, and that is more than enough. And last but not the least is we are also looking at that how the escalations which are coming from the different stakeholders like sales, from the distributors or from the marketing or the demos, how we can manage over any app on the mobile by having recording from the point of loading and hand over it to transporter till the time it is in transit and got delivered. So how we can keep that record into the system so that we need not to have hard documents in place for that evidences. So this is how I foresee, and I totally buy the point that future is that all the technologies which were supposed to come towards 2030 because of this pandemic almost implemented, and that is something which is for all of us who came from a generation, and I personally did that. I was into the custom domain and way back in 2003, wherein we used to go to importer's place, get their invoice and packing list printed, come back to office, make the bill of entries on typewriter, then go to the customs, file that paper, get that endorsed manually with each officer, get assessed, get out of charge, and then again print the document and go with the truck. So everything is gone. So we are coming from that age, and we need to train ourselves and make our mind shift in such a way that we are adopted.
Sure, Kartik. Thanks a lot. Right, I think you made some excellent points as well. Right, compliance. Right, when you move from digitization and our legal systems earlier being used to paper and paper records, and therefore while you move to digital, one from a legal perspective, tax perspective, compliance. Also, I think a very interesting point. Right, going back to the topic. Right, forward-thinking companies sometimes move ahead of the curve and set the agenda, right? So as an example, Sennheiser, right, moving to EPODs, moving to trade compliance initiatives in 2018 ahead of the pandemic coming, right? And therefore, this session today, we us trying to figure out, what are forward-thinking companies? What should they be doing today now? Now, what is forward-thinking today, right? Because some of this has already been happening, right? An initiative that you spoke about in that context, e-invoicing, right? Government also enabling that, and therefore for domestic business, how can you actually have transactions where there is no paper at all, right? From invoicing to e-way bills to way bills to whatever, right? Everything just being on an app or whatever, right? And then exception management, right? How do you manage by exception? Because everything, once it is electronic, right, it helps you drive exception management in a much more smarter way for everyone involved, right? And probably drives collaboration also much better. So thanks a lot, Kartik, around that. Mr. Kishore, why don't you share your perspective, right? Different sector, right? Aerospace is a very demanding sector in terms of compliance needs, accuracy needs. What's the perspective that you have around digitization and taking paper out of the supply chain, and what challenges do you see, and where do you see the most need?
Definitely, yeah. So thanks again for that nice handoff from Kartik and Hemant. So yeah, when we're talking about aerospace, it's mostly B2B. So that is the area that I wanted to stress on. We deal with a range of airlines worldwide, also a range of service providers, and we cannot put all of them in the same category. Some of them are thinking ahead, like some of these businesses, they are investing in the electronic data interchange, automatic ship notices, and so on. Whereas on the other side, we have what we call as customer service regions, where they have to rely on printing something. So even though they call it paperless or e-customs, their main format is to try to make something into PDF, print it out, scan it, sign it, and then send back, and then put it somewhere on the cloud. So if we look at some of those weaker areas, that is where the international freight is really having a tough time. We really have to look at the trade compliance, not just for the customer's perspective, but also from the range of every other person in the ecosystem. Some of these freight forwarders who are able to move freight, the big cargoes and project cargoes, they are also not able to invest in, because their volumes are low. So they just wanted to ship 250 aircraft engines. So they're not going to invest in the whole ecosystem. So they just rely on easier paper-based thing. You just have to end up signing up 50 different pages with your life away. But that is where I think some of these forward-thinking companies like Freight Tiger and other RPA companies are coming up, and they are the ones that are helping us with the implementation, because it's not just one-way side, right? So we have to implement on our side as well as on the receiving end. So I think that is where the availability one is is getting better. And beforehand, it doesn't have to be a huge investment. Like, there are a few companies who could afford EDI in the past. Whereas now with the supply chain analytics and all these cloud-based platforms, it's just a very small tool that you just have to manage inside of supply chain analytics, where the suppliers are automatically getting the e-invoicing, they're automatically getting the supplier portal. So it's not just taking information one way, but you also have something to lend to them. So that's, from my perspective. And again, global aerospace companies, depending on their huge range and diversity of the people and companies that they're dealing with, they also can leverage their scope, and they could certainly make it viable to other people to implement.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Nandakishore, right? And I think you also brought a few good points. One, obviously EDI, more and more common. Earlier, we used to talk about EDI integration used to be projects which would run months and months. Now,
Right.
Everything is API. You just share APIs, and hopefully you're good to go in much faster sort of space. You also spoke very interestingly about the fact that sometimes within our own environment we go paperless, but when the interfacing period point comes with government, with the supplier, with the vendor, with the customer, we have to convert electronic back into paper, right? Because that's the way it is, right? So from paperless to paper, right? And how do we sort of move away from that, right? And I remember right now from my perspective, I remember over the last 12, 18 months, when the pandemic was there, delivery orders to get containers released from shipping lines, right? They only work with paper DOs, and there was no provision to sort of go and work with electronic DOs, and there was no people available to give the paper DOs, right? And containers were stuck for months and months, right? So yes, how you bring in adoption of electronic documentation across the board at interface points, a great point. So I'll take it from there, and Joshua, I'll invite you to talk, because obviously Mr. Kishore has set it up for you in terms of the international supply chain side, and what's happening there in terms of enablers to drive digitization, and what are areas which are still sort of areas of challenge, right? So Joshua, why don't you share with us, on the international trade compliance side, international trade side, around digitization, growth which is happening, adoption which is happening, and also key challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Saurabh. So the whole context of this discussion, whatever Kishore has set it up, or even Kartik, it all emerges. We all talk about, okay, customs brought this, post-clearance audit, this. But I just wanted to throw some statistics and some framework for your understanding. The United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, they adopted a framework on facilitation on cross-border paperless trade in May 2016. What do they say? If a country, if they fully implement this, the savings which they make is $257 billion annually, which means the turnaround time will reduce 44%. And the cost savings purely only for APEC region, $7 billion annually. Okay, so this is a region which I've given you statistics. Now, taking over from here, we have a facilitation agreement called World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement. Okay, it went on from Singapore arrangement for a long time. And finally, we got signed, India signed in 2014, it got implemented in 2017. Now, what does that has to do with paperless? If you see all the 3 sections and 24 articles of that agreement, if a country implements that agreement, India is also party to it, and we have an obligation to fulfill it by 2022 February. That OECD prediction says that a developed country will save about 10% global trade cost. A developing nation like India will save about 13.67 to 17% global trade cost, which means it translates to 1% is equal to $40 billion. So earlier I have said only for our APEC region, because of the framework on facilitation on cross-border, we will be saving $257 billion annually. Now, OECD prediction globally. Now, if you take developed countries, there are countries they have implemented this. So India, being a signatory to this agreement, we have relevant paperless articles like Article 7.1, Article 7.2, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4. All these are all relevant articles connecting India to get into paperless. Now, we hear Turant customs, paperless customs, faceless assessments. So all these things are part of the TFA drive that trade needs to understand from customs perspective. So why we are so boasting about, oh, customs implemented delivery order online, customs implemented out of charge online, customs implemented this. Why not the trade understand there is an article which already demands customs to do it, and they are going on a fast track. And the trade is not aware about it. They are thinking that every now and then customs is bringing out something and they are just praising customs. Instead, we expect the trade to go one step ahead to understand and walk along with customs. Today, the trade is not coping up with customs because they aren't privy to what are the engagements that we have globally and how the department is going ahead to complete the obligations on their part. So this the trade needs to keep in mind. Now let's take about a survey. United Nations Global Survey on the paperless trade. They have taken 2 surveys, one on the paperless, another one on the cross-border trade paperless. Since I'm talking about cross-border, so I'll limit my statistics only to that. In 2015, cross-border trade paperless is only 11.81% for South Asia, not for India, South Asia. 2017, it went about 37.5%. Again, in 2019, it dropped to 20.14, and 2021, maybe because of COVID, we are now at 26.39%. Okay, so this is the statistics about South Asia. Now, where do the developed economies are standing in 2015? In 2015, they were standing only on the cross-border paperless trade, 69.38%, a global average of 47%. In 2017, the whole world went to, that means the developed economy went to 75%, and South Asia is only 39% against the global. Okay, now 2019, which is relevant, is 78.34 developed economy cross-border paperless. South Asia 48%, and the global average is 60.9%. Now 2021 is relevant. Developed economies move to 81.86% paperless, cross-border paperless. In terms of global average, 65%, wherein South Asia stays at 58.47%. So all this shows very clearly that the world is moving towards TFA. So which means every 186 countries across the world are members of TFA. Some are developed countries, some are developing nations, some are least developed nation. Okay, forget about the least developed nation. Let's take these two nations. We have a moral obligation to fulfill it by 2022. So the government is aggressive. Now let's take our stand on paperless trade with China. In terms of formalities, in terms of transparencies, in terms of institutional arrangement and cooperation or paperless, we are not equal with China, only on the cross-border paperless trade. More or less, other than transparency, formalities, institutional arrangement, we are at par with China. Now, when you take the best country in the world, for example, Singapore, we are nowhere close to them on issuance of SPS or certificate of origin, electronic customs declaration. We are far ahead to go. Okay. But there are some areas like e-payment, we are closer to them. Electronic submission, we are closer to them. So these kind of permissions, declarations, we are closer to them. So why this country not able to move ahead? I would like to put it across this to the trade so you can take it up. We have one major pillar called, out of the three pillars of safe framework, one major pillar is customs to customs cooperation, customs to trade cooperation, and customs to PGS, that is participating government agencies cooperation. Now here we come, there are 36 allied ministries who are standing as a blockade to implement single window. Now, for example, all of you are importer, like
just heard from Kartik, he is importing consumer goods. Is he, though being an AU operator, is he able to take the goods without labeling? No, because legal metrology says, unless you fix it, we will not be in a position to allow you to take the goods. So there we need some kind of a cohesiveness. The National Committee for Trade Facilitation still pushing, but we are yet to move ahead to a larger heights on this. So the one option available for us, the Turant Customs government is moving very faster to increase the World Bank ranking. And we have already moved up 63, 13 points up. But still, what is lacking today, a simple aspect. We get documents, for example, let's take an importer. They take a documents from a shipper to an ERP. They just hand it over to a custom broker who then feeding this information back into their system, whatever the application, again pushing it into IceGate. Only thing what is required, the REST file is already out. If only customs comes out with an API, I am sure every importers are ready to push this data directly from their ERP to customs. Of course, we can have some options for clearing re-import, machinery shipments, so we need custom brokers, especially in the trade facilitation agreement. Article 10.6 very clearly says importers can use their own way of clearance without insisting on custom brokers. So the days are changing. I am sure in the next few years, we will be embracing a larger paperless culture. But on the practical side, Saurabh asked me to tell me, Joshua, what is the practical side? Today, I upload, for example, AEO papers have become paperless. I upload all these documents, but still customs is asking, give me all the hard copies. So how do they process? They go through the papers, not through electronic mode. So there is a mind shift needs to change from customs side also. The last but not the least, the mutual recognition arrangement is being signed between India and many other countries. As of now, we have 3 and we are likely to sign on the 7th. The typical one that you all can look for is the US and UK has signed recently using a blockchain. So all the supporting documents which is required for a customs clearance and a cross-border trade are uploaded into the system if they sign a MRA.
So thanks,
on a real-time basis, they are able to see that. So probably if India also moving into that kind of an MRA regime, we will have the full-fledged full-fledged paperless movement that we will be seeing it. And subject to the TFA implementation, it is not only the government, the trade needs to piggyback and they need to also move along. Then we will be seeing those kind of a glorious days. Saurabh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So I think, Joshua, you made some excellent points, right? Obviously, right, once you go paperless, speed of trade and speed in the supply chain sort of goes up dramatically. You also spoke about how, there's dramatic saving if you automate, right? You gave us statistics on cross-border trade and how, by driving automation and going paperless, there's actual savings which sort of come through. That's the second point you made. And then, you brought out the difference in developed world and developing world, and though there is progress everywhere, but how the developing world is less digital and therefore less competitive as an economy, and therefore technology as a driver for economic competitiveness, right? Another interesting thing that you spoke about is that how government today has a roadmap for automation or technology, right? Because they have global commitments in certain cases or domestic commitments, but maybe trade is not completely privy or has not spent enough time to understand that, and therefore maybe trade doesn't have a forward-looking roadmap, keeping in mind what the government is anyways going to bring in, right? So I think very interesting points, right? At this point, Swapnil, I'd like to bring you in and hear from you about what's happening in the domestic side, right? Again, right, massive change, COVID, technology, adoption. What's really happening, and what are success stories? What are challenges? What's really happening?
I think in many ways, we kind of have talked about sort of the drivers, right? Everyone else so far. And you see manifestation of that today in road freight every day. And what I mean by that is every one of the reasons we talked about today in terms of cost competitiveness or what, you see it play out at a much faster pace than at least I have seen before. I've been tracking this space for several years. And what we see today in the last 18 months is this need, urgency towards digitization. And in terms of, if we think about success stories, I mean, what is terrific is ultimately there is a little bit of a human need that we all want to do better. We all want to use our time a lot more productively. And we all also believe that you can achieve more with the existing physical or manpower assets that you have. And you see that play out when we talk to customers, and the number of customers, even with Freight Tiger, that have gone live or they've digitized their entire end-to-end flow is quite high. And the pattern we see, Saurabh, is before customers would start with typically one part of their supply chain or one module. And increasingly, we see more and more people say, we want to do the whole thing end-to-end. We don't want to tiptoe or kind of first test it out anymore. We have enough conviction and we want to find a partner to take this kind of all the way, is what we see. I would say challenges, and every challenge ultimately is an opportunity for young companies like ours, but supply chain inherently requires a lot of collaboration, a lot of handoffs between IT systems, people, stakeholders. And part of the market is very digital savvy. Part of the market is starting to get there, but there is a little bit of gap today. And one of the challenges then that gets created is you have one end of the market that wants to move very fast, and the other end of the market might take a little bit of time. So then it's a little bit about how do you balance that, and what all you can do. Anyone, right? Either a shipper or a receiving party, consignee, or a platform like ours. What do you do to still make it happen? Because ultimately you got to respect to some extent some of the on-ground challenges, or if there are behavioral changes that require a little bit more nudge, It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's moving in a direction, I think, which is extraordinary today than it's ever been.
So, Swapnil, just one follow-up question, right? How do you see whatever the government is doing, right, from a road freight, domestic transport perspective? How is that playing into enabling this change or restricting this change?
What I think about is, first is awareness. What government is doing today is also driving a lot of awareness about these things. And if I may stretch this idea a little bit about what government is doing, not only in supply chain, but when we see what happened with Aadhaar, UID, what is happening with UPI, what is starting to happen with e-way bill, e-invoicing, now the recent change in account aggregation, which that is just taking the entire country, industry, people forward. And those tailwinds are quite strong. Now, it is sometimes perfect? Not necessarily. I mean, even when we think about e-way bill today, there is a little bit of challenges where sometimes people are erroneously getting penalized or things like some of that is there and will, I think, resolve itself out. But I get excited every day by the way things are changing. And we think about it as, if we look at supply chain today, we talk about supply chain costs, and a lot of cost is actually financing and working capital cost. And what account aggregation potentially can do to help that reduce, that could be incredible. So even though it may not be a direct change in supply chain per se, but the digital infrastructure that is getting created is going to help all of us in advancing, or the pace at which we can do this will be far greater.
Yep. I agree with you, right, on the fact that, the supply chain sort of space, a lot of working capital. Sometimes we internally think of us as an NBFC. We say we're investing in the customer's business, right? And we have to invest in people who can pay it back. And yes, the building blocks of IT, right, which are driving opportunities and solutions, which I think, industry is still figuring out, as these platforms sort of come through, right? Because everyone's going to depend on their own, right? Anil, I'd like to bring you on this note, right? And hear from you, your perspective on what sort of work you've been doing, what sort of problem statements you're getting, and how is digitization and robotics and RPA, etc., automation fitting into this whole story.
Okay, thank you, Saurabh. I think one important aspect which we all need to realize is that technology is inevitable, right? We all have seen the way technology has taken over most of our most of our lives, and very recently, Kartik was mentioning about school and homework and all these things being done from home, and I know that I will extend that by saying that my daughter gets the homework done from Google Home also. So I guess this is the way technology is getting utilized today, right? We use Google Home, Alexa to get all our answers on the fly. So technology is inevitable. Now, question is why? And why is the most important thing? I think all of you covered most of those aspects, like, for example, the huge savings which Joshua mentioned. Now, when we talk about why we introduce any technology, is definitely for two aspects. One is, how do we get new customers and have a stickiness to the customer? And secondly is, how do we bring the efficiency in the way operations have been performed, and we can save the cost, right? These are the two main angles. And this is where technology has transformed as well. For example, if we talk about our organization, we started with process automation, which was 5 years back, 6 years back. But then, the hyper automation took stage. When I say, what is hyper automation? Hyper automation is all about machine learning, AI, which takes intelligent decisions, right? What you were doing, mainly automating repeated tasks. Now technology is, doing more than that, and utilizing some part of human brains to automate further. So this is the way I see it. I think, like I mentioned, savings and new customer acquisition, savings for the customers. I think this will become the prime in the future. And that's why the technology adoption is very, very important for every organization in logistics space. When we talk about the kind of use cases, there are multiple, customer service. Today, we are implementing solutions like when a customer, calls you or sends a mail to you asking for some information, how the system bots can actually look at information and reply to customers without even human intervention, right? That's the speed of response. And if the speed of response and the customer service becomes very, very crucial, or very, very fast, very efficient, then the end customer is also happy with the services that the logistic company is offering. Another use case would be, one of the big import-export organization, which has all these challenges which you mentioned about invoice, bill of entry, bill of lading, airway bills. Now the challenge is that when you have all these documents which comes to this the logistic organization, you need to reconcile all these data, whether all the shipments are there, whether it is part of the invoice, whether it is part of BOE, BOL, airway bill. You need to do those reconciliations manually. And we are doing automation there, where all these documents are digitized, automated in an automated way. It is reconciled automatically, and then send a automatic report is kind of given to the end customer for ease. So basically, efficiency in the operations is what we look at when we are providing solution to our customers.
Thanks, Anil. Right. So I think it sets us up sort of brilliantly for the second portion, right? And Rima, IWS team, I'll ask you to request you to share the second question, right, for the audience poll at this point, and then we'll just take in the audience question and the answers, and then we'll go to our panelists to take their views on the same question largely, right? And the question that I have, which will come up on your screen shortly, is which process would you like to make paperless, or your prediction for which area of the supply chain that you think will sort of drive the largest value, or will get automated faster, right? The invoicing, waybill, LR sort of documentation piece, the tracking, proof of delivery, execution piece, right? And the post-execution LSP invoicing, reconciliation, payments piece, right? So we've broadly broken into 3 buckets, and we'll wait to see which area the audience thinks they want to see automated fastest, and then we'll go to our panelists to hear their views on where they see the most development happening, and anything else from their expert sort of opinion that they would like to add to that, right? So let's just wait for this. And while that happens, Swapnil or anyone else who wants to sort of answer this, we already got a audience question. It was around how can you actually run digital enablement or paperless execution from end to end in the freight environment, right? From an inspection perspective, compliance perspective, can you actually run a shipment end to end digitally? So Swapnil or Kartik, since you spoke about it, is this really possible, right? Maybe you can try to answer that quickly.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the things we recommend as well as often think about is a deeper integration with customers' ERP and their other IT systems. Because one of the things you want to do is drive a little bit of a standardization across the entire end-to-end process. And that can be done by, we think about at times a little bit like an orchestra, right? Our role as a conductor or almost as an integrator of ERP, telematics, your vendors, bringing all that together and driving a level of consistency in terms of what does your master data look like? Are your definitions the same? And I think today it's far more possible than it was, right? Just a few years back. And Saurabh, you briefly talked about the way integrations have moved from EDI to API. That ease today of integrations, technology, the cost is a lot less. So my quick 30,000 feet answer is by driving integration among your different ecosystems and bringing all your vendors, partners on a common platform. It's totally possible today.
And it's not a vision statement. We can hold you to it, and you can sort of make it happen on the ground, right?
Yeah. Also, just to add into Swapnil, say when you are you're creating transparency, you're creating audit trail. So transparency is like you can pull out, and then audit trails, like governance right now is all-time high and is going to go much more stringent. As government is putting a lot of thrust and emphasis and accentuation on governance. So like pulling out a paper from a wardrobe and then presenting it to the auditor and then convincing him that this is the right document created then. Yeah. And then say proving it probably will be spending like at least 10 hours across people who are sitting chasing. When you have this audit trail, so you just have to present one document. I think things are very clear and progressive, and the whole efforts is just can be concluded in a couple of minutes.
What you're saying is actually the digital ecosystem provides for better audit trail, etc., and it is an enabling environment rather than a restrictive environment, even from a compliance perspective, right? That's really what you're saying. All right, wonderful, thanks. So we'll go around. Maybe Hemant, we'll start with you. Why don't you give us one prediction? Take a minute, give us one prediction for what you think is an area which will get automated faster, and give us a wish list of what you would like to see automated.
Saurabh, I lost you. I couldn't get the question. Probably a connectivity issue.
Yeah, Hemant. So my question was, if you can hear me now, one area that you predict will get automated over the next 12 to 18 months, which is today maybe paper-based, which will sort of move forward, or your wish list for one area that you would like to see automated in the supply chain sort of planning execution side.
Say I would say if I were to I have to pick up an area, so I will definitely look at the transportation industry end to end. Why? Because this is the most unorganized and out there. It's like if I look at deep into the transportation, like they're very, very fragmented, and in the last end of the society where like people are associated with. Now, if you're able to like digitalize through, the untapping of the potential is maximum. So probably transportation industry is around $200 billion in India, but the inefficiencies to be transit time. So currently the transit time and the loss of time during toll is very high. So now if that goes seamless, the turnaround times, efficiencies, and the speed that goes from one destination to another will move significantly. So that would be my first vote, where the difference in the grassroots level, not only in society, but in the organization efficiency will be brought down significantly. So that would be my first choice to go with.
Thank you. Thanks. Kartik, why don't you take a crack and tell us your prediction or wish list for an area of supply chain execution, supply chain planning that you would like to see getting automated, going paperless?
Yes, so one which I was supposed to talk about already Hemant took up, but yeah, that is buzzing around the lead time in transit. But again, one which I am already working on is about the survey, which is invoicing Waybill LR. It would happen in coming months. And the last one, which is very much doable, and Hero, I had seen since 2009-10, Hero Group is doing this while they issue the LOI to their transporter. At that time, the truck number and all other details get fitted with the rates, with the origin and destination. And once that truck come to the point, that detail get fitted into the software. And once POD get punched by the distributor or the dealer, and if there is no remark, automatically as per the cycle, payment get transferred. So no bill required, no escalations required. It was happening. And I know that Hero must have done more automation to that. So these are the two areas where we should work on.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. To the point that Hemant also made, right? Fast tags, right? And I think partly to what Swapnil also said, fast tags I think will become an enabler for driving a lot of this, because toll payments, fuel payments, so many things could just run electronically on the back of that digital wallet, which every truck is now carrying, right? Kishore, why don't we get your opinion?
Saurabh, I will just add one line before you go forward. So I was hearing about Mr. Gadkari, and what I understood, if I'm not wrong, is even in future there would be no FASTag which would be required, because most of the vehicles are now GPS enabled, and they are making the highways in such a way wherein the moment you will enter the toll and the moment you will exit that toll road, automatically it will get debited. So even you need not to wait at toll to get that debit happen.
Sure, makes sense. And yeah, I heard the minister also say that. Mr. Kishore, why don't you share with us your prediction or wish list?
Yeah, so definitely the wish list will be the customer or the supplier interface. So starting from invoicing, receiving the advance ship notice from our suppliers, their invoice payments, like how Kartik has mentioned, all the way to like receiving the goods. Of course, RFID helps with all the other quantity related aspects, but with more and more artificial intelligence and machine learning, there are quite a lot of these adaptive technologies that are happening. where you don't even have to count, you just have to automatically push them through the 3D scanners, and they're automatically telling you how many parts are approved, how many of them are going into like some kind of resolution hold. So things like that. And once the quantity is approved, then the payment is automatically being allocated to the supplier, and it goes in the payment cycle. Same thing from us to the customer side also, along with the transportation, international freight, and the container shipment is a big, huge fragmented ones, like our esteemed panelists have mentioned a couple of times. So instead of putting everything on a paper, scan it and attach it on an airway, almost all the information is there. But instead of doing it as a PDF, if the data can be translated between the parties, and that would be quite a big welcome change. And again, you see some of these stack of papers, or we are killing Amazon forest just for one shipment at this rate. So be the wish list for me for sure.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And coming to Swapnil, Anil, Joshua, right? You can obviously not have a wish list. You're the ones here who are supposed to make the wishes happen, right? So please give us a prediction for what will happen over the next 12 to 18 months, which maybe trade is today not anticipating, right? Which will change how supply chain execution happens. Your view, a prediction, right? Joshua, why don't we start with you? 45 seconds, 1 minute, please. Yeah, because we're running late.
So my point here is, thank you, Saurabh. My point here is that I'm talking from the customs perspective, pre-clearance stage, custom stage, and post-clearance stage. If you divide all these things into three parts, there are some mechanisms available which the trade needs to use it, like advanced ruling. In the clearance stage, AEO. In the post-clearance stage, post-clearance audit. If the three things are part of the TFA. But if these things are meticulously not orchestrated, we will not be able to move ahead. Okay, 1. 2. 3PL is a highly ignored segment, whereas the WCO has recognized in the new version e-commerce because of the 81% increase in their order volume. Whereas the top 50 global 3PLs, their gross logistics revenue has crossed more than 308 billion, and the velocity of transaction has increased 100 times. So which means a sector which is 15.8% growth sector is completely ignored. So my wish list is, since you said that it's not a wish list, it's implemented list, this segment needs to play a role because importers has limitation. Government is only interfacing with importers and they have limitations. They have different priorities. But the one who can come out with the bars is 3PL and 4PLs. They need to understand these gaps and they need to pick it up. If that happens, globally, there will be a transformation. That's it.
So essentially, you're predicting that 3PLs, 4PLs who are able to bring in the digital capability to drive this gap will grow. Swapnil, your view, prediction on what's going to happen, which we can't see today.
Yeah, so instead of one, let me split it into two. In terms of prediction, what I feel, Saurabh, is historically, logistics often is considered, cost and cost center. And I really think how it can enhance customer experience is something we'll see more and more. Majority of our discussions today with customers are, as much as cost is important, how do I improve my customer's experience? And that increases revenue, availability of your product in the market, and so on and so forth. I see a little bit of that shift happening, and I hope that can hold it. Second thing, which is my wish list almost, and I think I hope it's a prediction and we can make it happen, is often people think that most companies don't want to release payments faster because everybody's trying to kind of figure out their own working capital. And what I would love to say to all our panelists and to everyone that is there is far more benefit in expediting payments, automating it, than 10 days or 20 days of 1 month of buying working capital, because the level of inefficiency and cost, it increases. So I hope payments and financing becomes super seamless, accessible, and it really brings down the cost of logistics for everyone involved.
I think completely agree. That's a beautiful area.
Yeah, Swapnil, I agree with you. So the payment delay is going to bite you than to anybody else. So to save your bite to yourself, you need to be efficient there. I totally endorse that too.
And yeah, as technology enables you to be able to track what happened, whether there's a damage, no damage, I think the payments can just flow. They don't need to wait, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful point, right? Anil, we'll wrap it up with you. Why don't you give us one prediction?
Yeah. So I think, from all the areas that we spoke about, I think technology is going to touch all the areas. Okay. There is no area which will be untouched, be it paperless. I heard people saying about, APIs being available. I think there is a option for that also, alternative for that also, where bots can actually go on behalf on custom portals and do the job for you. So I don't think there is any limitation as far as technology is concerned to, where we can bring automation in logistics sector. So I am kind of open and saying that, in all areas, the technology will impact and help us, all of us, in bringing that efficiency.
And bots can do what APIs cannot do, is what you're saying.
Yeah, of course. Bots can do what API can do easily. And it's doing it right away.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. I think we've had a great panel, and I hope it was useful. We have a couple of questions, and I think we're running a little behind time also. But there's one question that I would like to just put to people, right? So one question that we'll take up is, how can we rely on paperless technology in logistics to drive efficiency, right? So maybe if someone can take this up and talk about what efficiency can come, if we actually automate end to end, right? We spoke about it, but maybe just to recap, right? Swapnil and Anil, maybe you can have a go. What's the efficiency? How do you actually capture the efficiency?
I'll add to it.
Absolutely. When we map, with customers, we do this exercise. From a time you have a sales order, you have a PO and your dispatch order, all the way till when you make payments to your transport company or a vendor. When we measure that total cycle time, it typically varies anywhere between 30 days to about 120 days, right? And if you look at that 30 to 120 days, out of that, the actual transit time is just 3 days. Everything else is just paper. That's about it, right? And when you compress that, it's incredible what it can do for not only for you as an org and for your entire ecosystem. And then what that's doing is it reduces the cost of working capital financing that is inherent in that inefficiency, and the turnaround time at each step, turnaround time at loading, unloading, transit, from your sales order to DO, all that transformation, when you do paperless, it allows you to cut time, save time in each one of those steps. And each one of those steps, you save time, and that's really equals to kind of the money saved as well, beyond all the other benefits. So to me, we are very wired to think like that when we think about end-to-end and efficiency, and paperless and digitization.
Great. Anil, you want to add something to that before we hand it over back to Rima?
Yeah, so I think, I completely agree with what Swapnil was saying. To add to it, for example, Swapnil also earlier mentioned about customer service. Now, when you automate the end-to-end chain, and if, let's say, in the entire chain, there is a impact at certain stage. For example, let's say there is a cyclone somewhere and your shipments are going to get impacted. You won't know unless, the paper comes to your desk and you're feeding in that information. And then if it is paperless, all this information is wired into the database. You're able to take real-time decisions on it. And that is the key going forward in future. The data will be the key for taking a lot of decisions, bringing efficiency in the organizations.
Yeah, exception management, event management, autonomous planning, optimization on the fly using AI, ML. You cannot do any of that if you don't have data, if you don't have this.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right.
Thanks a lot, Anil. Wonderful perspective. Rima, so I think we finished the discussion, and thanks to all the panel members for contributing. And I personally learned a lot, Rima.
Great. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you all the speakers for sharing your thoughts. And I'm sure today's takeaway will be very helpful for all of us. We appreciate you being here. Now, I request everyone to join back the exhibition where we have the best suppliers of the industry waiting for you. Enjoy networking and have a good business. Read Exhibition and India Warehousing Show. Thank you once again for joining us today. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.